Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive into the world of auto repair? We're going deep today, figuring out what makes these businesses tick, for folks who might want to own one, maybe even buy one.
Sounds like a plan.
And, lucky for us, this industry report we've got is packed with insights. It's like having a mechanic and a business consultant right here with us.
That's a great way to put it.
It even gets into some pretty wild predictions about, how self-driving cars might shake things up down the road. But okay, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with the basics. What makes a repair shop really stand out to customers? What makes them want to come back?
Well, I think anyone listening can probably relate to this, and the report really hits on it. Convenience. It all starts with location. I mean, think about it. If your car's acting up, you're not going to want to drive across town to some shop you've never heard of.
Yeah, totally. You're probably going to pick a place that's easy to get to, a place that's, on your radar already.
Exactly.
Maybe you saw an ad or a friend recommended them.
There you go. That word of mouth, that general awareness, it all ties into the next big thing, reputation. The report actually calls public trust a big challenge for this whole industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense, right? It's a lot like choosing a doctor. You're putting a lot of trust in their diagnosis, in their expertise.
Absolutely. You want a shop that can not only fix the problem, but also explain it to you, in a way that makes sense. No one wants to feel like they're being taken advantage of.
And that's where transparency comes in big time. Shops that can clearly explain what needs to be done and why, and maybe even educate their customers a bit along the way, well, they're going to build that trust. They're going to stand out.
Yeah, for sure. And, the report also mentions specialization as a winning strategy, which makes me think about, electric cars. You're probably going to want a mechanic who really understands those systems, not just someone who, tinkers with combustion engines.
Exactly. And that kind of niche expertise can really attract a certain type of customer. Think about classic car restoration. You wouldn't take your, vintage Mustang to just any shop, would you?
No way.
You're looking for a specialist who really understands those cars, someone who, speaks your car's language, so to speak.
And I bet you'd be willing to pay a premium for that level of knowledge, for that skill.
Absolutely. Specialization can be a really smart way to differentiate your business.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about location, reputation, specialization. But beyond those, technical skills, the report really emphasizes customer loyalty. What are some of the things that contribute to that in the auto repair world?
Well, it goes beyond just fixing the car, right? You got to build that relationship with the customer. It's about those little things that show you care. Appointment reminders, loyalty programs, maybe even throwing in a free car wash every now and then. These small touches, they can make a big difference.
It's like the difference between just a transaction and a real experience.
Exactly.
You want customers to feel valued.
Yeah. Now, let's say you're not looking to build a repair business from scratch, but you are interested in buying an existing one. Well, this report has some really interesting advice for potential buyers. It's like having a seasoned investor in the room with us.
Okay, so let's get into that investor mindset then. What are some of the things a savvy buyer would be looking at?
First things first, they're going to want to dig into those financials, looking at key benchmarks like the quick ratio, working capital turnover, things like the debt to net worth ratio.
I'll admit, some of that stuff, it's a little over my head. Could you break it down a bit? What are these ratios actually telling us about a business?
Sure. Think of it this way. You wouldn't buy a used car without checking its mileage, without making sure the engine's in a good shape, right?
Right.
Well, these financial ratios give you a similar snapshot. They tell you how efficiently a business is using its resources, how much debt they have, whether they have enough cash on hand.
So it's like checking to make sure the business is running smoothly under the hood, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense. What else would a buyer be looking at besides the numbers?
Well, just like with any smart investment, they're going to want to look into the business's reputation. Checking online reviews, talking to other businesses in the area, maybe even reaching out to past customers. You want to get a feel for how the shop is perceived.
It's like doing your due diligence, just as you would with any other big purchase.
Now, remember how we talked about how cars are getting more and more complex?
Yeah.
Well, a smart buyer is going to pay close attention to a shop's technology and equipment.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're way past the days of simple wrenches and screwdrivers. Cars are like computers on wheels now.
Exactly. A computerized diagnostics, they're absolutely essential these days. A buyer wants to know that a shop has the right tools, and the software to handle these sophisticated systems.
It's like making sure a surgeon has the right instruments.
Right.
You wouldn't want to go to someone who's still using outdated equipment.
Good analogy. And finally, let's not forget about the most important asset in any repair business.
The technicians themselves.
You got it. Especially with that technician shortage we talked about earlier, finding and keeping skilled technicians, that's got to be a major concern for any buyer.
Oh, for sure. Sounds like shops are always struggling to find qualified technicians.
And a buyer's going to want to know how a shop attracts and keeps talent. What's the pay like? Are there opportunities for training, for advancement? What's the overall culture of the shop like?
So it's more than just having the latest technology. It's about having the right people to use it and creating an environment where they want to stay and grow.
Precisely. Now, beyond how a shop runs internally, there are some broader industry trends that any potential buyer would need to think about.
So that brings us to the big picture, right? The auto repair world is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
What are some of the trends that are really shaping the industry today?
Well, let's start with the challenges. This is a really competitive market. You've got everyone from small shops to big chains to dealerships all competing for customers.
Yeah, it seems like there's a repair shop on every corner these days.
And then on top of that, you've got the technician shortage that we mentioned. That's a real problem.
Definitely.
And to make things even trickier, car manufacturers are making it harder for independent shops to do their jobs. They're controlling access to repair information.
Wait, so you're saying it's getting harder for independent mechanics to access the information they need to actually fix cars?
It's definitely creating some tension in the industry. But, despite all these challenges, there are some exciting areas of growth to think about, too.
Okay, so tell me about the bright side. What are some of the trends that make you hopeful about the future of auto repair?
Well, for one, electric vehicles are creating this huge opportunity for shops that are willing to learn new skills, to adapt.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West out there. Any shop that can become an EV expert is going to have a real advantage.
Absolutely. And it's not just the mechanical stuff. The report also talks about this booming market for, like, automotive software. This could change the game for repair businesses.
Oh, interesting. How?
Well, think about it. You could offer software updates, troubleshooting, alongside traditional repairs.
I see.
You become a one-stop shop for all of a car's needs.
Right. It's like bundling your cable and your internet.
Exactly. You offer a wider range of services, you become more valuable to the customer. And here's another interesting thing. People are holding onto their cars for longer.
Okay.
That means more older cars on the road, which means more maintenance, more repairs.
Makes sense. Cars are a big investment.
So we've got this growing number of older vehicles, plus more electric vehicles, plus the potential of automotive software.
This is making me excited about the future of the industry.
Yeah.
But there is one big question mark looming over everything: autonomous vehicles.
Ah, yes, self-driving cars. It's the wild card that has everyone wondering, will they lead to more repair work or less?
It's hard to say.
The report actually makes good arguments on both sides.
Yeah, I can see how it could go either way.
Yeah.
If cars are driving themselves, maybe they'll get into fewer accidents, less body work, fewer collision repairs.
That's one way to look at it. But on the other hand, imagine these autonomous vehicles are constantly on the move, racking up all those miles. Think about all the wear and tear on those parts.
Yeah, true. And what about all the sensors and cameras and computers in those self-driving systems? All that stuff could malfunction.
Exactly. And you're going to need some highly skilled technicians to diagnose and repair all that.
So it seems like the impact of autonomous vehicles is still kind of a mystery.
It is. But it's definitely something that any potential buyer would need to think about carefully.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. What makes a repair shop stand out to customers? What a smart buyer would be looking for? And some of the biggest trends in the industry. Where do we go from here?
Well, in part 2 of our deep dive, we can really dig into some of those trends and explore what they mean for both shop owners and folks who might want to buy a business.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So we've talked about some of the big trends facing auto repair, but I'm curious, what specific advice would you give to a shop owner who's, trying to navigate this changing landscape?
If I were to put on my mechanic's hat for a second, I'd say prioritizing trust and transparency, that's got to be at the top of the list.
Okay.
The report really highlighted how much public mistrust there is in this industry.
Makes sense. People want to feel confident that they're not being, upsold or taken advantage of. But how can a shop actually demonstrate that transparency?
Well, it starts with communication. Don't just tell a customer they need a new alternator. Show them why. Maybe use photos or videos to illustrate the problem. Explain it in a way that anyone can understand, even if they're not a car expert.
It's like, show your work. It
Exactly.
builds that confidence when you can see the thought process, the evidence behind a recommendation.
And being upfront about pricing, that's huge too. No one likes to get hit with a surprise bill.
Ugh, yeah, I've been there. That sinking feeling when you open the invoice and it's way higher than you expected. Not fun.
And then to really boost that customer loyalty, those little extras can make a big difference. A follow-up call just to make sure the repair went well, a discount on their next oil change shows you value their business.
It's like you're saying it shifts things from a purely transactional, relationship to something that feels more like a partnership.
Exactly. You're both invested in keeping that car running smoothly. Okay, now let's shift gears a bit, put ourselves back in the shoes of a potential buyer. Besides the financials, which we talked about earlier, what else should they be paying attention to?
I'm still thinking about those financial ratios. They're really useful, but I think some people might be intimidated by all the jargon. Is there a simpler way to think about these concepts?
You're right. Those ratios can seem pretty daunting if you're not a financial whiz. But at the end of the day, it's all about understanding how the business makes money. Look at their profit margins, their expenses. Are they managing their inventory well? Do they have good cash flow?
It's like, are they making smart decisions or are they just barely getting by?
Exactly. And beyond just the numbers, I would encourage any buyer to talk to the current owner, talk to the employees, try to get a sense of the shop's culture.
Yeah, it's about the vibes, right? Do people seem like they're proud of the work they're doing? Does it feel like a good, supportive environment?
Those factors are often overlooked, but they're so important. A shop with a good culture is more likely to keep its employees, and we know how crucial that is in this industry.
The report also mentioned these strategic alliances with car dealerships, and I'm curious how that works in practice. Like, why would a shop want to partner with a dealership?
Yeah, that was interesting.
Well, it's all about using each other's strengths.
Hmm.
Dealerships often have resources that independent shops might not have, things like special training programs, equipment, maybe even direct access to parts from the manufacturer.
Makes sense given their relationship with car makers. They're probably more likely to be up on the latest technology and stuff. Exactly. And for an independent shop, partnering with the dealership can open up all sorts of new opportunities. Maybe they get referrals for work that the dealership can't do, specialized repairs, body work, things like that. It can really be a win-win.
So both sides benefit. Okay, now I want to circle back to those industry trends we were discussing. Things are changing so fast, and I think a lot of shop owners are probably feeling a bit overwhelmed. What advice would you give them about where to focus their energy?
To me, staying ahead of the tech curve, that's essential. Whether it's investing in training for EV repairs or looking into automotive software, shops that embrace these changes are going to be in a much better position.
It's like be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. And this might sound a little counterintuitive, especially with all this technology we're talking about, but never lose sight of that human element. At the end of the day, this is a service industry. It's built on relationships.
We talked about customer relationships earlier, but are you saying that applies to the technicians as well?
Oh, absolutely. Customers want to feel heard. They want to feel understood. They want to trust the people who are working on their cars. If you create a shop environment where technicians feel valued, respected, that's going to translate to a better experience for everyone.
It sounds like you're saying that even with self-driving cars and all these computerized systems, the human touch is still what matters most.
I really believe that. No matter how advanced cars become, people are always going to need a mechanic they can trust, someone who can fix the problem but also explain it, and who really cares about keeping their car on the road.
That definitely rings true for me. I've always appreciated mechanics who take the time to, explain things and make you feel like a valued customer, not just a number. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the technician shortage. Any thoughts on how shops can attract and keep skilled technicians in such a competitive market?
It's a tough one, for sure. But I think it starts with creating a workplace where technicians feel valued. It's not just about offering a good salary, it's about providing opportunities for them to grow, investing in training, and creating a positive work environment.
It's about recognizing that technicians are the heart of the business, that their skills are essential.
Exactly. And I think we need to start thinking outside the box when it comes to recruiting new talent, partner with technical schools, offer apprenticeships, maybe even create mentorship programs.
Those are great ideas. It seems like the whole industry needs to be more proactive about developing the next generation of technicians.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about work-life balance. Nobody wants to work crazy hours all the time. Creating a workplace that respects employees' time, that values their well-being, that's key for attracting and keeping great people.
Okay, we've covered so much ground. Building customer relationships, navigating these industry trends, dealing with the technician shortage. Any other key takeaways from the report that you want to highlight?
One thing that really stood out to me was the emphasis on those specialized services. I think this is where independent shops can really shine.
Right. We talked about EVs, classic car restoration,
hmm
but are there other areas where specialization could be a smart move?
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be as niche as those examples. Maybe you become the expert in diesel engines, or you focus on a specific brand of vehicle.
About finding your niche.
Exactly. And when you have that specialized knowledge, you can charge a premium. You can build a loyal customer base. It's like they say, the riches are in the
I
niches.
like that.
Before we move on, any words of wisdom for our listeners who are, really into the world of auto repair, whether they're thinking about owning a shop, buying one, or just passionate about cars in general?
Yeah, great question.
I'd say stay curious, stay adaptable, never stop learning. This industry is full of possibilities, and those who are willing to embrace change, they're going to be the ones who succeed.
Well said. Thanks for sharing your insights with us today.
My pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
So we've really dug into what makes an auto repair shop successful, from, building that customer loyalty to staying on top of all the tech advancements. But there's one big piece we haven't explored fully, the financials.
You're absolutely right. Whether you're running a shop or thinking about building one, understanding the money side of things is crucial.
And I know we talked about some of those financial benchmarks, those ratios earlier, but I think it's worth taking a closer look.
I agree. They can seem a bit intimidating, but those numbers can tell you a lot once you get what they mean. So let's try to demystify them a bit, huh?
Let's do it. Where should someone start if they want to really grasp the financial health of a repair business?
Well, one of the most basic ratios is the quick ratio. Basically, it tells you how easily a business can pay off its short-term debts using its most liquid assets, things like cash on hand and what they're owed from customers.
So it's about how quickly they can get their hands on cash to cover those immediate bills.
Exactly. And a higher quick ratio, usually that's a good sign. It means they have plenty of funds ready to go to meet their short-term obligations.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the working capital turnover ratio? What does that one tell us?
The working capital turnover ratio gives you an idea of how efficiently a business is using its working capital, which is essentially the difference between its current assets and current liabilities.
So it's a measure of how well they're using their short-term resources to bring in revenue.
You got it. A higher working capital turnover means they're generating more sales for every dollar of working capital they have, which is a good indicator of how efficient their operations are.
Okay. And last but not least, let's talk about the debt to net worth ratio. Why is that one important?
Well, just as the name suggests, it compares a business's total debt to its net worth, which is basically the value of the business once you subtract its liabilities.
So it shows you how much debt the business is carrying relative to its overall value.
Exactly. And generally, a lower debt to net worth ratio is better. It means the business relies less on borrowed money and has a stronger ownership stake in its assets.
Wow, I'm starting to see how these ratios can give you a really clear picture of how healthy a business is financially.
They really can. And although these are just a few of the many benchmarks to look at, they're a great place to start if you want to understand how a repair shop is doing.
Now, beyond just, crunching the numbers, what advice would you give to someone who's looking over the financials of a shop they might want to buy? What are some red flags, things that would make you take a closer look?
Well, one thing to watch out for is profit margins that are steadily declining. That could be a sign of all sorts of problems, like rising costs, poor inventory management, or even pricing pressures.
It's like when your car starts getting worse gas mileage, right?
Yeah.
It might be a sign that something's off.
Exactly. Another red flag is a lot of debt, especially if it keeps growing and they're not making more money or seeing higher profits.
Yeah, that makes sense. It might mean they're struggling to stay on top of their bills.
Yeah. And finally, pay attention to their cash flow. Even if a business looks good on paper, if they're always having trouble paying their short-term expenses, that's a big problem.
It's like having a fancy car, but no money for gas.
Right. Cash flow is vital for any business. You got to make sure it's healthy.
So basically, a smart buyer can avoid a lot of headaches by really digging into these financial indicators and looking out for those warning signs.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered so much in this deep dive. From customer loyalty and technology to financial analysis, it's been quite a journey. As we wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts for anyone out there who's interested in the world of auto repair?
The auto repair industry is constantly changing and full of energy. For anyone who wants to be a part of it, I'd say stay curious, stay flexible, and never stop learning. Put the customer first, understand how a successful business works financially, and keep up with the latest trends. Those are the keys to thriving in this field.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of auto repair.
It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. We hope you've learned some valuable things about the auto repair industry. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, safe travels, everyone.